Welcome, everyone. I'm Jonathan Kirchner, the founder and CEO of AIIR Consulting, and we are here today on a podcast about leadership. As we all know, for the listeners of this podcast, leadership is actualizing a clear and compelling vision through others. So pretty easy, right? Cakewalk. Not, no, not easy. And particularly not easy right now. Do recommend checking out our book, The AIR Leadership Framework, which talks about that definition and expands on leadership skills and what we need to do in order to develop the right skill set and mindset for leadership. And that's really what this podcast is all about. It's a conversation about leadership, not just generically, but also specifically anchored in the experiences of real leaders. And today we have an incredible guest. We have the one and only Bob Chavez, who is the former CEO of Hermes Americas. I brought my Hermes bag. This bag is it's stunning. I would pay money for this bag, just the bag itself. It's just absolutely stunning. And Bob now is a distinguished board member of Macy's and is the executive in residence at Savannah College of Art and Design, SCAD.
Yes.
And also runs his own luxury retail consultancy. So it is absolutely a gift to have you on the podcast today. And we also have my consigliere, wingman, my coach, and one of our senior CEO coaches, Jamie Ramsden, who wrote this book, which many have seen, Let's Go, an incredible book that just organizes the wisdom that Jamie has gleaned as a CEO himself, and also a coach to many, many CEOs. So excited to talk about this as well. Now, I want to, before we really get into it, I want to just share a story and why I'm so amped for this conversation. For many years, I have passed by the Hermes store, and I've just walked by and said, what is going on here? How does a brand sell a purse for $30,000? How does a brand make something that people just keep coming back for more and that they cherish and that is both practical and usable, but also like an art piece? How does that happen? How does a brand do that? And so high stakes moment, celebrating our 20th anniversary. I'm like, I gotta go big. I'm going to get my wife something really nice. And so I went into that store and I got an Hermes scarf. And the experience was some kind of combination of going into a museum, having a personal shopper, and just being in a store. It was this incredible combination, and it felt by the end of the about hour of going through probably 35 scarves to find just the right one, it felt spiritual. So this is the scarf we chose. Bob, you may have an interpretation of this, but it's quite beautiful, and just gives you a sense. We'll put this out on the table, and we can all be inspired by this gorgeous scarf that my wife, it definitely scored big points. All this is to say, Bob led Hermes for over 2 decades as CEO of the Americas and grew this brand into an extraordinary organization. And we have him here on the call, and we have Jamie, who worked closely with Bob to share about leadership. And so I'd like to just like kick us off, Bob, with getting an understanding of you and your journey. So you studied, you studied at Princeton literature and the Romance languages, which isn't necessarily the standard profile of a CEO. So can you help us just trace a line from your days at Princeton and what you studied to how did you become this legend in retail as a CEO? Help us connect the dots.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, first of all, for having me here. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here with you. Um, well, if I could go back a little further than that, let me start by saying that I was born in San Antonio, Texas, and I was a poor kid. I grew up on what they call the wrong side of the railroad tracks, and I had a teacher who pushed me to go outside of the state. And I said, like, where? And he said, you should go to an Ivy League school. And I did not know what an Ivy League school was. I had to go look it up. And then I looked it up and I thought, why would I go to an Ivy League school? It's far away. I'd never left the state of Texas. I was 18 years old, had never even been outside of Texas. So he pushed me and I applied. I got into Princeton and came home one day. My mom handed me the letter. My father passed away the year before. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this. So I was excited. But I came back and I thought about it and I thought, I can't go. So I said to my mom, no, I'm not going to go. And she said, no, you have to go. Your father would want you to do this.
Wow.
This is your future and you should go. So I bought a Greyhound bus ticket because couldn't afford airfare. And 48 hours later, I was in Philadelphia and then got myself to Princeton. So I had to start my life completely. I had to start all over again. And the one thing I remember is that there wasn't one person I could walk up to and say, oh, wow, it's really nice to see you. Like, tell me all about, your experience getting here, whatever. Nobody. I had to start making new friends, meeting people. And I did little by little. It wasn't easy. I was not prepared for an Ivy League school.
And this was the first time you left Texas?
First time I left Texas, yeah.
Just Greyhound bus.
Greyhound bus, silly, yeah, to Philadelphia. I saw the arch in St. Louis. I saw the Pittsburgh skyline at dusk. I'd never seen these things before, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing." And San Antonio back then was a small little city. It wasn't what it is today. So I got to Princeton, and it was beautiful, but I couldn't appreciate the beauty because I was so nervous and I was a little scared. And then I had to start studying, but I had to work because I was on scholarship, but I also had to work because I couldn't afford everything that I was, paying there. And my first paper, I got a C and I was devastated. And I thought, wow, that's a slap in the face. And I thought, okay, no, this is going to be a lot of work, hard work. So I had to study, and I did, and I worked. I worked in the kitchen at my the Princeton Inn, it was called. That was the name of my dorm. And so I thought, all right, we're just gonna make this work. And so I did. And I was I was very intimidated by the people that I was around because we would sit having dinner and they'd be talking about all these things that they did, like, oh, so what did you get for graduation? Oh, I spent the whole summer in Europe. Oh, I got one person said to me, oh, I got an Audi. And I asked her afterwards, I said, what's an Audi? And she goes, it's an Audi, not an Audi. She goes, you don't know what an Audi is? I said, no, I've never heard of it. She goes, it's a car. I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't know it was a car. And I was praying that it didn't come around to me because I thought, if I have to say what I got for graduation, it's going to be very embarrassing because I got maybe $300 for my whole family. But I thought, no, you know what? That's it. It is what it is. And I got over that because I thought to myself, I have something to contribute. It may not be a lot, but I have something to contribute. I'm here to contribute just as they're all contributing. And once I put that into my head, I started to make it work. And so I ended up majoring in Romance language and literature because I wanted to be a teacher and then I wanted to be a professor. My dream was to become a third grade teacher. And my parents said to me, if you become a third grade teacher, you'll be a huge success. Because when you come from a poor family, becoming a third grade teacher is an accomplishment. And that was my goal. That was my dream. So then I got to Princeton. I thought, well, maybe I could be a professor. Maybe I could teach at a university. And I was going to go on to graduate school, but I was so burned out after 4 years. I was exhausted, mentally exhausted. So I thought I have to do something for a year or two, and then I'll go back to grad school. So I fell in love with New York when I got there. And I thought, you know what, let me interview with different companies. So I was interviewing with a lot of companies when they came to campus, banks, insurance. Very boring. For me personally, it was very boring because I was going into New York and going into the offices, and I thought, God, these people don't look very excited about what they're doing. And then one day the retailers started coming, and I got a call back from Bloomingdale's to come into the city for an interview. So I did, and I walked into that store, and I thought, wow, the energy, it's crazy in here. And I thought, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. So I got a job as a executive trainee, is what it was called.
Okay.
And they were paying me $9,500 a year to live in New York. Way back then, it was I was rent poor. It was a struggle, but I thought, okay, fine. And I did it, and that's how I started, and I stayed with it. And 1 year turned into 2 years. By the third year, I thought, maybe I'm not going to go back to grad school. As I started to really like it, so I stayed with it. And 47 years later, I retired as a retailer.
Oh my God, that's an incredible story. By the way, it's amazing that we're in Philadelphia right now, which is where that Greyhound
Yes,
drops you off, not too far.
Yeah.
Near probably 30th Street Station or
Yes.
somewhere close.
Special place for
Yeah.
me.
Unbelievable. It particularly resonates with me that you had this teacher. It sounds like this teacher gave you a really important push or challenge to go outside of your comfort zone. I also had that same experience in high school. Like I had this amazing art teacher who, her name was Mrs. Cram, and Mrs. Cram would come over as we're painting and say, it's gorgeous what you're doing, and that is just so special. And yet, do you feel like you're pushing yourself to the limit?
Yeah.
And somehow that combination of support and validation with that challenge was I was able to feel good, and yet also wanting to strive to go even further.
Yeah.
It was really cool. Anything you have a teacher or
Well, I was going to say, I actually trained to be a teacher
really?
before I was a CEO. And then they told me like how much of my time would be spent administering and, not actually teaching. And I was like, oh, and how much is the pay? And so, but I think there's something in what you were saying about, there's a couple of themes that I'm hearing that are relevant, I think that resonate. One is about like having been pushed. And I remember Richard Boyatz is talking about like the people who've pushed us or encouraged us or saw something in us, and also the reverse of that. And I think this is really relevant with Bob, because how he would challenge people in a way that didn't seem confrontational or contradictory or diminishing.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is the teacher's craft, and it's also the CEO's craft, is seeing potential and unlocking potential in others.
Well, and also creating these conditions of safety where you feel compelled to push further outside of your in this book, which obviously I love, you talk about invisible fences and getting outside of your comfort zone. And I think one of the most like difficult but also rewarding aspects of leadership when done well is when you're able to set those conditions where somebody is willing to get to that other side of fear. That's very hard to do.
Yeah.
By the way,
I was chuckling actually because Bob even did it to me. Even though I wasn't part of the team, one of the sessions that we had, he was like, I think we can go further. I think we can push harder. I think, without describing the detail, because that
without it feeling threatening,
but it's like,
without it feeling like, oh man, I didn't do good enough, or
like I think he's saying the conditions are right. Let's go that next step and go further in pushing and challenging people while we were in the room together. And I think that's an exceptional skill. And, I don't think anybody does it as well as Bob does. But to me, it's that thematic about sort of that the educational drive, or the being able to see potential where other people may not, and understand motivation where other people may not. That's something that is really, it's not in many of the books that you read when they talk about leadership, typically we're going to say, okay, who didn't perform, or what didn't happen, or what do we, what's missing from this scenario, instead of understanding or taking that second step beyond to say, well, how do we unlock that? Like, there must have been an obstacle. People don't show up to work to do lousy work. Most of the time they come because they want to do good work. And so being able to take that pause and think about, well, how do I challenge them in a way that's constructive, and how do I remove some of the obstacles that they may not see, right? What's the invisible obstacles that they may not see, but I may be able to see that are holding them back. And so, I say Bob does it as well as anybody I've ever worked with. He even did it to me. That's amazing. Wasn't on the team.
That's embarrassing, because you were supposed to do it to him, but that's incredible. And by the way, like, that's the beautiful thing about our job as executive coaches is how much we get to learn from our clients, right? Bob, so you got off the bus, you did Princeton, you decided to take a leap and took the job at Bloomingdale's, which now, I don't know, it sounds like 40 years later or so, now you're on the board of Macy's, which is also an amazing full circle. Help me understand, like, at what point, maybe it wasn't a singular point, but like, when did you realize that, like, you're not just going to be a doer or even an executive doer, but that you have this innate capacity to lead? And at what point did the emergence of that identity come through for you?
I would say it probably, again, everything is in retrospect, because at the time I was so nervous, I was scared, but I thought, okay, I'm going to make this work. And a funny story, when I made that decision that I have something to contribute here, in one of the conversations, I was telling the story about how my parents used to turn the radio on Saturdays, and they would dance, like in the small little dining room we had. And then my mother would grab me and she would dance with me. So I've always loved to dance, and it comes from that memory. So one day we were talking about different things, and the topic of dancing came up, and none of these Princeton people dance, none of my fellow students. And I was like, you don't dance? Like, what do you mean you don't dance? And they're like, well, we don't really have the opportunity or anything. And they said, well, what kind of dancing do you do? I said, well, all kinds of dancing. I said, but I've also learned, because of my parents, I learned, some ballroom dancing. Like, what? Like ballroom dancing? I said, yeah. And they said, well, would you maybe be willing to like teach us? And I said, oh my God, like, yeah, sure, why not? So I started a class. I started a ballroom dancing class in the Princeton Inn, the dormitory, and we'd clear out the dining room. And the first week it was maybe 6 students. The next week it was 15 students. The next week it was like 20 students. I was like, whoa, no, that's it. No more. We can't do any more. And they were all, I was teaching them all how to dance. And it was amazing. So that, I think about that now, because I'm thinking, like, where did that come from? How did I get that idea? But it was just that, like, something inside of me said, okay, no, you're going to contribute something and you're going to make it work. So then I became known on campus, like, oh, this is the guy who teaches ballroom dancing. This is Bob Chavez. He teaches ballroom dancing. It wasn't like Bob Chavez, the poor kid from San Antonio, anymore. It was like, the ballroom dancer. And that led to other things over time. I just kept doing more and more and more. And another story, that Christmas, I went into the travel agency on Nassau Street because I thought I couldn't afford to go home for Christmas, and I wanted to go home for Christmas. So I walked into the travel agency and I said, so how many tickets would I have to sell to get a free ticket? And she looked at me, she goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, if I sell X number of tickets and generate enough revenue, how many do I have to sell for you to give me a free ticket to get to San Antonio? She goes, you're serious? I said, yes. So she does a little calculation. She goes, okay, so you have to sell 20 tickets. And I thought, oh my God, 20 tickets. I said, okay. And she was kind of like, this is never going to happen, but fine. So I went out and I sold 26 tickets because I knew there were a lot of people from Texas there. So I was out hustling. I sold 26 tickets. I got myself a free ticket to go home. And my mother was like shocked. She said, I thought you said you were coming home. I said, well, I made my way home.
God, I love that story.
And that's how it started. And Jonathan, after that, I just felt like, okay, I can do this. I can put a challenge in front of me. I can do that. I can find a way to figure it out. I can find a way to make it happen.
That's absolutely amazing. I love that story. Oh my goodness. And I love that like you made dance go viral. But then I also heard in that you said at 20 we're too much, right? And that actually makes me think about Hermes, right? It makes me
Yes.
think about creating incredible amounts of demand, but knowing when to say when, and not constraining supply per se, but knowing how to balance quantity and quality in such a way that you create this sort of magical point of where the consumer just wants something so bad, right?
Yeah.
And they can maybe get it, right? So let's just I'd love to understand your perspective on this fascinating company. Like I have a story. Like I speak to CEOs and executives all day and we've been doing this for 16 years. I had asked an insurance the president of the biggest division of an insurance organization, like what do you aspire towards, and what intrigues you in the world of leadership and organizational success, and he said Hermes. I said, what? Hermes? Like you're in insurance, that's a luxury retailer. He's like, Hermes. Like I want to figure out how they did that. So maybe you could help us like understand what's the secret sauce that could create such a, I describe this buying experience as spiritual, right? When you go into most stores, it's not a spiritual experience per se. Like you get what you need and then you're out. Help us understand how Hermes got to be the way it is.
Well, that's a heavy question, but I mean, I'll probably jump around to a lot of places, but I would say it starts with the family, really. It's a very humble family. You never read about the family. You don't see them on social media. You don't see them in the society pages.
Right.
You don't hear about, private jet, private yacht. You don't see any of that. They're just a very humble and a beautiful family who care. They care a lot about the people that work at Hermes. So it starts there. And then it's what I've learned over the many years and from the beginning, that it's an uncompromising commitment. And I never forgot that word, uncompromising commitment to quality, to craftsmanship, and to making beautiful product that will last a long, long time. And one of the family members many years ago said, Hermes makes things that can be repaired. And I never forgot that. I thought, wow, we make things that can be repaired. And that's how the family thinks. That's how the business has been built on that. Not like, well, it's going to wear out. It's not going to be in style next season or next year. It's really, and it's where I came up with, I mean, I just described it as sort of like, timelessness. There's a timeless or an enduring style to the things that Hermes makes. And that's why these things can get passed down generation to generation, because they will be enduring in their style. And another great thing, John Louis Dumas, he was the 5th generation head of the company, and he's the one who hired me. He said to me one time, he said, Bob, he goes, we always ask ourselves the question. He goes, we make something. He said, I always ask everybody, is this going to be relevant 25 years from now? Is it going to be usable 25 years from now? And I remember thinking, like, 25 years, a retail person? No, that's like impossible. And so every time I looked at product, thinking 25 years from now, and do you want to know, I have things that I bought when I started 25 years ago, and I still wear them. And I think of John Louis Dumas, and I thought, he knew that. That was how the family thought. So it is that uncompromising commitment to quality and craftsmanship that has really made the company enduring. There's a tremendous amount of patience in terms of like, you don't have to rush and grow the business, so quickly. Yeah, you have to grow the business, but it's not about rushing. It's not about opening up like tons of distribution, going for the next thing, following the shiny object. It's just that uncompromising commitment to all these things. And it sounds easy, but you have to be committed to doing that, really committed to doing that.
That's unbelievable. I love this notion of an uncompromising, attitude towards quality and craftsmanship. But there's also this piece around like timelessness as almost like a design principle. So like when we set out to make something, will this be timeless? Does this have a 10-year shelf life, 15 years, or is it actually timeless? And if it's timeless, then we proceed. But if not, then it doesn't meet the criteria to proceed, perhaps.
Yes, exactly.
That's incredible. Okay, so that definitely helps me understand more about the magic. If we were to think about what it's like to lead within that context, can you help that? What is it take to lead within that context? I mean, sort of, people are wired for they want growth, and they want that immediate gratification of rapid growth and expansion. If somebody were to say, I want more of that, you say, absolutely, and take even more. Like, how do you, this is like the nature of humans, right? Like, we're not wired to be patient.
No, we're not.
So how do you lead successfully in that context? Maybe you could share a little bit about like, what's the leadership playbook, and also like what are some of the challenges?
Yeah,
as a leader.
Well, if I could just share a story with you, when I got the job, I was so convinced I wasn't going to get this job because I thought, why is Hermes going to hire me?
The CEO,
yeah,
and you went
to Hermes. I thought I went from I started at Bloomingdale's 10 years, Macy's 6 years, and then AIIR for 8 years. Moderate price, a footwear accessory company. I love to say our shoes were $49.99 and the decimal was in the middle. And so I didn't really have luxury experience, and I couldn't understand why. I thought, well, no, Hermes, they're not going to hire me. The recruiter said, well, you have to go to this interview. So I went on the interview. I thought, I'll meet these people. Then they asked me to go to Paris. I met Jean-Louis Dumas, and I thought, I'm not going to not meet this man. So I did, still thinking, never going to happen. So then I get a call. We had a story, and he told me the story that his father said to him, you have to know that we are first and foremost retailers. And he said, you're going to lead the company someday as the family head. And he said, so you need to learn the retail business. And he said, there's only one city for you to go to learn that business, and that's New York. And he said, there's only one place in New York for you to learn it the best. And he's like, that's Bloomingdale's. And he says to me, I had a great mentor when I was at Bloomingdale's. And he goes, I said, oh, well, who was it? And he goes, his name was Mike Blumenfeld. I said, wait, you worked for Mike Blumenfeld? And he goes, you know Mike Blumenfeld? I said, I worked for Mike Blumenfeld. And you know what he says to me? He goes, how old are you? So I flew home. I got home Friday night, and Saturday morning, the phone rings, and guess who it is? It's Mike Blumenfeld. And I thought, oh my God. I said, so he called you? And he goes, yes, he did. And he said, and he only asked me one question. And he said, he didn't want to know about your management style. He didn't want to know what you were like to work with. He didn't know how do you deal with other people. He said, just one question. I said, well, can you share it? He said, yes. He said, can I trust him?
That is unbelievable.
Yeah. And so then my future boss flies over the next Tuesday and offers me the job. And I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. And it was a no-brainer, of course.
Wait, so he flew, because we're not talking about flying from Chicago to New York. He flew from Paris. To New York
to personally hand me the letter. Wow. And I never forgot that. And I thought, wow, that says a lot to me about this company. The word elegance always comes to mind. It's one of the things I think about Hermes, but it's not only the elegance of the product, it's the elegance of the people that work there. And that just I thought, you know what? Anybody who does that, I want to work for those people because
That's
I want to be like that.
that's absolutely incredible. Okay, that is an incredible story. So that then becomes the beginning of you
That was the
being
beginning.
CEO.
Yes.
That's tremendous. Well, Jamie, you've had the opportunity to work with Bob and his team, and you've also written this amazing book, chapters that resonate with all of us. I'm curious, like, does one chapter in particular stand out to you when you reflect back
Yeah.
on the work itself?
Well, if I can be greedy, there's actually two that I think of
Oh,
when I think
you
of
can squeeze in two.
Bob and Hermes. The first one was about this leader as storyteller, because that is something that, we keep coming back to, and you can hear it, lots of people talk about this idea about storytelling. But we actually structured one of our sessions with the wider team. We had 26 people, I think, in Jersey City for a day and a half, and we structured the organizational the team session around storytelling. So telling the individual story, telling our story about us as a team, telling our story about the organization, and then creating the story about what we're going to go and do. And so, that whole chapter about storytelling was really informed by the time that I spent with Bob and his team, Hermes, but it is intrinsic to leadership. And Bob does this so well, which is you're modeling the behaviors, you're communicating with your team, right? You're unlocking the power and the potential in the team. You are sense making, you're helping them to understand what the context means. And I'd really love to hear Bob talk about this a little bit more about sense making. How do you, inform the team about what's going on? How do you prevent them from making, instinctive decisions or market driven decisions? How do you stay grounded, particularly in an organization that's thinking about 25-year cycles instead of 25-minute or 25-day
Well, and you have
cycles?
like fierce competition all around. There's sharks all around. How do you sort of focus on the long term and having these sort of uncompromising, adherence to things like quality,
Right.
when there's so many shortcuts or even just like short-term thinking that could help solve something immediate.
And so
Well,
part of, when I went inside the organization, I could see this natural capability that Bob has is better than anybody else I work with. But his team also had this ability to be able to tell stories, because we're connecting people to their own story through these products in a way that's going to be lasting and enduring, that brings elegance and finesse. It's so aspirational. And that brings us to sort of the last part about storytelling, which is the future that we're going to go and inhabit. And so I saw that really clearly. And so that's a really good chapter. Secondly, and I said this to Bob when the book
oh, wait, hold on. The storytelling and sense making, two separate things. Right?
yeah, sense making is part of the storytelling.
Mhm.
So there's the stories we tell about ourselves. Then there's the stories we tell about our team or our organization or the group of people that we have galvanized together to make a better future. But then there's the stories about the context, and that's the piece I would love to hear Bob talk to a little bit, is about sense making, because as a leader, you are helping people to understand. Certainly, this is my experience. People come into your office and say, hey, something's happened and we need to react, or something's happened, what are you going to do about it? Or something's happened, and they leave a pause, and then you might feel obliged to do something. And so sense making is understanding your own self, your own frame of reference, the team, the capabilities you have, but also the strategic discipline to be able to say, no, we don't have to do that, or we're not going to do that because that's not who we are. And that was really, I've got to imagine that's such a powerful force in the heart of aggressive retail, where you're saying, no, hang on a minute. We are 25-year thinking. We're creating something that's of beauty and of value that people are going to have the experience versus just a transaction.
Mm.
And then finally, we have the, sort of future shaping or the community building, the stories we tell about where we're going. And so as natural leaders, we do that. And I'm just intrigued. I'd love to hear Bob talk a little bit about how did you resist the pressure to react in the short term to right in the hotbed of, one of the most aggressive retail markets in the world, if not the. How did you resist that pressure? And how did you reinforce that point with your team about, no, that's not who we are. We don't need to react. We know who we are and we're good.
Well, I would start with saying that you have to unlearn a lot of things, that I had to unlearn a lot of things. And when I first started, um, well, let me just add one more thing. I finally went to Jean-Louis after I got hired, and can I just ask you a question? I said, why did you hire me? Because I don't really have any luxury experience. Simple answer. He goes, because you're a retailer. And I thought, okay. So then when I started asking things like, well, can we do this? Can we try this? Everything was no. And I thought, well, this is very frustrating. Everything was no, no, no. And so I thought, okay. Then someone said to me, you're asking for too many things. This was a French colleague. And they said, instead of going and asking for 5 things, only ask for 2 things. And I thought, well, that's the most stupid thing I've ever heard of. What difference is it going to make? It's going to be no. So I thought, all right, fine, I'm going to try it. So I went, asked for 2 things. Don't you know, I got my first yes. And I thought, God, how did they know that? So that made me think like, okay, so I have to understand the culture better. I have to listen a lot more. And then I went back to the trust thing. I thought, oh, now I get it. That's the trust thing. I'm going to have to be trusted before I'm going to get more leeway. So I got my first yes. We moved forward with it. It was a good thing. It worked out. Then I got another yes, and then another yes. And then over the years, I became, I had a lot of yeses, and they really did trust me, and they let me make a lot of decisions, of course, with their collaboration. But I was really starting to drive the direction, the business, the company, in parallel with everything that Hermes was doing. But initially, I thought to myself, "Oh, I didn't even understand how this company works. It's like everything they do is wrong. It's like, who takes the ready-to-wear off the floor at the end of the season and holds it for another year before they put it, to an employee sale or even a once-a-year public sale." I thought, "That's crazy. You put it on sale at the end of the season so that you can make room for
inventory and make room.
Yeah." And I'm thinking, this doesn't make sense. And then afterwards, I'm thinking, shame on me, because it works, and it really works. And I thought, okay, so unlearn, because it doesn't have to be done that way. There's another way to do it. And so once I got that, I thought, okay, now I have to listen more. I have to understand more. And I'm a patient person to begin with, but I really had to learn patience. But I learned from them. I learned from the family. I learned from the people at Hermes. And it was a great thing, all these stories about, like, is it going to be relevant 25 years from now? Uncompromising commitment, to quality and craftsmanship. And we talk about uncompromising commitment to quality. It's not just the quality of the product. It's the commitment to the quality of the people. It's the commitment to the quality of the experience. It's all of these things. And this just sort of enveloped me. There's no other way to describe it. And then that's when I started. I thought, okay, this works. This works for me. I like this. This is great. And we're gonna go with that. And again, going back to that kid in San Antonio and Princeton, but you know what? I'm gonna try to even make it better than that. Um, and that's what I did. And that's when we got onto this whole culture thing, which Jamie knows a lot about.
Well, that's exactly what I'm thinking is like, how do you, so fine, you got it, right? It clicked for you, but you've got an organization of thousands of people, right?
Yes.
And, people aren't, you can't just like dip them into something called culture and pull them out and everybody's now rowing together, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It'd be awesome if it did. Edgar Schein, famous, culture guru and professor, would say that culture is sort of the values and behaviors. It's like the collective values and a manifestation of those values and behavior that in the sort of amalgamation or aggregate, represents like the culture, for better or for worse, right? Obviously, usually it's like kind of a little bit of a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Drucker would say that, culture, like strategy is important, like really important, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's how important culture is. So, as a leader, and something we talk about in the AIIR leadership framework, this notion of culture building, which is one of our really important dimensions, one of 12 dimensions of leadership. It's much easier said than done. How did you build a cohesive, thriving culture at Hermes, and what's your perspective on culture?
Well, first of all, so it's probably one of my favorite quotes in the whole world. The culture
The
eats
culture.
strategy for breakfast. Because the family believed, and then subsequent I believed, but even more so, that if everything is right, then the bottom line's going to happen. The sales are going to happen. The bottom line's going to happen. What happens in so many businesses is that everybody looks at the bottom line first, and then tries to back into like, okay, how are we going to get there? To do this, do that. But if you're just doing everything else right, from here, from your heart, then it's going to happen naturally. That person who's showing you 23 scarves and telling you these stories and wanting to make sure that you pick the exact right scarf for your wife for your 20th anniversary, you can't replicate that, and you're going to come back because thinking like,
I'll come back.
wow, this was a great experience,
And I'll probably pick up some cologne on the way.
yeah, and that's what people do. So I thought that this is really important, and I made it a mission, a personal mission, that we're gonna change the culture, because what I encountered when I first started. There were a lot of complaints coming from some of the stores, and there was one store in particular. I don't want to call them out now because there's a great store, but someone said to me, "Who do your people think they are?" I walk into the store and they're all standing there like this, hands folded, like, "Oh God, she's not going to buy anything." And I thought, who's doing that? So I went to the store one day, like unannounced, and I walked in the front door. Sure enough, there were 3 people standing there like this. And I thought, wow, this is really happening. Because I thought, this is this is going to change. So we started to make the changes little by little. So we created a vision statement. We created what we call the 7 standards of service. And you heard me say earlier that when I sold those tickets is make it happen. Make that dance class happen. Make that free ticket happen. And that became one of our 7 standards of service.
Make it happen.
Just make it happen.
Make it happen.
Make it happen. Yes. Whatever you're doing, just make it happen.
Like will it into existence kind of thing?
Yeah. Or just find a way to make it happen. Just
make it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we got to get home for Christmas.
Yeah. And I've gotten exactly. It's somehow, some way, just make it happen. If you have to sell 20 tickets, if I'm on 19, then I'm going to be on the street,
But I could see somebody being like finding that to be like daunting and almost like a scary thing. How do you make that exciting, like and inspiring?
It comes with people.
Yeah,
people.
You have to have the right
people. Want to have they.
Meaning, you have to have the right people, or you have to create the right conditions.
You have to create the idea that they can do it. You have to believe in people, and you have to. Some people are going to be on different levels, but when you find the person who says, "Oh no, I can't," I say, "Well, why don't you just try? Take a baby step and try," and then they take the baby step, and then they're like, "Wow," Then push them to the next step. Push them to the next step. You can't push all the people like that because they're not all going to go. But you sort of assess and you figure out, okay, this one can go a lot further. But it goes back to like that leadership, leading with emotion, which is what I did. And the number one thing was that if you care for people, if you respect them, if you recognize them and you reward them, they're gonna give you so much more back than you could ever imagine. And once I saw that that's what could happen, I thought, no, this is what it's going to be like. This is what we're going to do. We are, and I started referring to us as a family, that this is our family, and you're a part of this family. And culture is a 24/7 job.
You don't just set it and forget it. You don't
no,
come up with the 7 imperatives for.
Yeah. And then it's a piece of paper, you hand it out. Everybody hands it out.
By the way, there's the poster of those 7 things there.
Yeah, exactly.
I got to go now.
And then you forget about it. It's like, no.
It's
No,
20%.
That's part of the role, right, of the leader, is to reinforce that in your daily conversations, is to remind people of what it is you've set your organizational direction, and just
Yeah.
remind that
It's
grounding.
tricky because, to come up with those 7 things and to make it beautiful and
Mm.
to translate that vision into storytelling is like, it requires so much effort that, like, as a leader, I see this with a lot of, people that I coach. I've seen it in myself. Like, you're like, I did it, job done. Like, I conveyed the cultural expectations and the imperatives, and now everybody's got what they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
You have to get tired of saying it.
yeah.
You have to really.
Well, I'm curious, like, what were some of the tactics? And I know, like, Jamie, you've talked, about your work with Bob and about,
Yeah.
some of the tactics.
Well, he just said something about leading with emotion, and I'm gonna paraphrase that into leading with love, because and that's something you don't normally hear in these kind of conversations, but that really is. Bob, is an exceptional leader, and this was so unique. I haven't seen it since or before. Is the ability to just use that. We talk about trust, or we may talk about respect, and those are good proxy words in the workplace. But I never saw a leader speak so much about love, loving the work, loving the product, loving their clients, loving their employees, and using the word love in a way that I haven't seen anywhere else. And so, and I said this to you when I wrote the book. There's a chapter. The last chapter talks about what great leaders do, and they do. They lead with love. If you want to use the word trust and you feel more comfortable with that, that's fine. But it is possible to actually use that kind of terminology to describe people as a family and mean it, to push people because you love them and you want them to be their best. You want them to see in themselves the thing that you can see in them from the outside, because that's intrinsically a lot easier. But also to create this environment where people are prepared to take care of each other because they care for each other. And so, I was able to see it firsthand. I was deeply appreciative. And I'm interested, like, about the part of the methodology, I would call it this, were the weekend reflections. And so once a week on a Friday, I think it was, that Bob would send, and it would either be an image, or it would be an article, or a thought, or just something that would inspire people, and typically signed off around, I love you, or like, I love what you're doing, or I love this organization. How much of those weekend reflections, or how did you leverage, what was the purpose behind that in connecting the culture? What was the value of the weekend reflections?
It was to give people a different perspective. It wasn't about business. It wasn't about, like, okay, the weekend's coming up. We have a big Saturday to do. The week we've struggled for the week. We have a lot to make up on. But I thought, no, they need to think about other things. They need to think about something, philosophical, or hear the words of another.
Not their
leader.
metrics and how much we sold
No.
or didn't sell in this category. And
Not at all. And it was really about, like David Brooks is one of my favorite, who writes for the New York Times. I used a lot of his, his opinions that I shared with people, and they were about leadership. They were about family. They were about caring. They're all types of things, and I would send them out every weekend. And sometimes it was just a simple note to say, you know what, take some time, relax, chill out, spend time with family, spend time with your friends, and just enjoy life this weekend, because that's important. It's important for you to do. And people loved it because it took them away for a minute, and then they came back even stronger and more energized. And I strongly believed in communication. It sounds so cliche. It sounds so, people roll their eyes. Oh, yeah, everybody communicates. No, people don't really communicate. And I really communicated a lot through the weekend reflections with the leaders. I would send, every year at the end of the year in December, I hand wrote a letter.
oh my God.
That would recap the year. And I'd say, just, want you to know that we've had a great year. It's been good. If it wasn't a great year, I said, our year was okay. We could have done better, but it was okay. We made it through. We're all here, and blah, blah, blah. Some of the highlights of the year. And then I would just close by saying, I just want to thank you for everything that you've done. None of this would be possible if it weren't for every last one of you. You all contribute. And I said, just want to wish you a great holiday season. Enjoy the time with your family and your friends. And I would sign it with love, Bob. And when I retired, I had several people come up to me and said, I have all 24 letters that you wrote me. I was like, no way. And they said, yeah. And they're like, here, look, they're right here. But always handwritten. And as time went on, when technology, everything was text, everything, I thought, no, I'm not gonna type it. I'm gonna and I still would handwrite it and send it out. Every employee in the company, every employee got them. So we sent a packet of 200 to one store, 50 to another store, 10 to another. Everybody got the letter.
That's I don't even know what to say. Other than that, I'm
That's
aspiring to do that.
yeah,
But
that's what brings people together. I mean, that connection, communication creates connection. And I discovered that early on. I'm thinking, this is pretty powerful. So I just kept doing it. And then when COVID hit, I thought, I started writing, I started emailing people just to say, just here's an update. Here's what's going on. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. And then I gave them updates little by little by little. And I had no idea how strong that was until I started getting emails back from individuals who said to me, I can't tell you how much your note meant to me. They said, because I'm not married, I live alone, and I've had some really dark moments, Bob. And they said, when I read that note, it gave me hope. And I thought, God, you don't even know what you're doing sometimes. And it just makes you want to do it more and more. Like, keep connecting people, keep bringing them together. And so I just kept doing it more and more and more.
we all know that there's these incredible values and principles that, inform the success of Hermes, but there's also this thing called leadership that just propped it up and bolstered it, and it's just amazing to hear. Absolutely, I think that was a critical ingredient to this magic. When I say magic, by the way, it's like you've got this luxury brand Hermes that zigs when this zags. If you look at a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, stock chart, it is a publicly traded organization. When the economy's down, it's still up. When Asia customer, recedes, it still figures out how to, it seems to buck the trend, in some ways defy gravity. I am curious though, because you're now, so you've no longer the CEO. You were chairman for 2 years, 2 years, and now have this, incredible position as a member of the board at one of the largest retailers in the world, Macy's, which owns Bloomingdale's. So really cool, full circle.
Yeah.
Like, so different. And yet maybe there's this sort of common denominator, right? I go back to what your boss said, why he chose you. You're a retailer, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, AIR has the great privilege of working with a lot of retail organizations and retail CEOs and leaders, and there's a lot of, retailers who watch this podcast. Help us understand how to thrive right now in retail when you've got, like, the amount of change and pressure is just extraordinary, from e-commerce and the implications to brick and mortar in the mall to COVID and some of the, not only that volatility, but even some of the overhang that may have arguably, like, shaped, in an enduring way, the paradigm of the buyer's experience.
Yes.
And with all that pressure, by the way, especially if you're publicly traded, it's very tempting, if not, it may sometimes feel like absolutely necessary to lead with the number rather than the value or the vision, right? Which to me is like the beginning of the end, or just sometimes you might make the number, but, like, did it feel great and was it energizing?
Yeah.
And I'm very conscious that your approach to leadership was not that, right? It was like the number will follow if we get all the behaviors right, but we don't lead per se with with the, if we don't put this number up and say, all right, let's go get that.
Yeah.
We put the behaviors up and the vision up, and then the numbers somehow follow. Help us understand the landscape broadly speaking, and then kind of what advice would you give to like a retail CEO right now?
Well, I mean, the advice I would give, and part of the answer to your question is really, it's about focus. It's really focusing. And what happens today, I think, is that people just keep looking at everything that's going on. Like, what are they doing? What are they doing? This is the trend. What about this? And people just keep doing that more and more and more. And I read a quote one time, another one I never forgot, and it said, "Distraction is the enemy of excellence."
Distraction is the enemy of excellence.
And if you think about that, that's part of what's wrong with retail today, is that a lot of people get distracted.
And there's so much distraction. It's unbelievable.
Look what they did. We have to do that. We have to do that, but we're going to do it better.
Yeah.
So your path is here. You go over here, and then maybe it's not exactly the right thing. So you have to have a strategy. You have to be committed to the strategy. You have to be uncompromising. There's the word again, to your strategy. And it was another thing that I learned from the Hermes family. They always said, just stay focused. They said, you could look over there, you can peek, but don't get distracted by it. Don't start getting obsessed by what the competition is doing. Stay focused on what we're doing, and stay focused on what we do best, and continue to do it best. And that's where then I read that quote and I thought, well, yeah, there it is again. It all matches up. So that's the thing. If you stay very focused, if you focus on all these things, and I go back to focusing also on the people. People are what make the difference. You walk into a store today, sometimes there's no people there because nobody wants to work there. It's and every company has a reputation, whether they know it or not. And these people share. They'll tell, oh, that's a terrible place. You don't want to go work there. I know maybe it's a great job, but you don't want to work there. They're really terrible. At the same time, they said, hey, Jonathan, I'm working over here and it's a great place to work. You should come interview for this job. So like people start to attract like people, and that just reinforces the culture. It makes it stronger and stronger. And it's a powerful formula. And it's not tangible. And sometimes people have a hard time with the intangible things, but it's the intangible things that make the difference today.
Meaning that focus is not tangible.
Focus is not tangible. No.
Right.
No.
Right.
Somebody could say, here's the strategy.
But a TikTok video is.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And the sweat coming down your forehead is.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you find yourself, looking out. And
yes.
There's a great quote. There's a book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Well, this is the second time I've invoked The Hard Thing About Hard Things on this podcast. Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, a very, very famous venture capital, a very successful venture capitalist. And in one of the chapters of that book, he talks about leadership and, kind of likens it to racing, which I can't relate to, unfortunately. I actually work with a CEO who at the age of in his mid 70s is basically a NASCAR racer, which is it's really cool. But apparently, right? You race cars. You race cars.
No, I don't.
You've raced cars.
Well, I was in the industry for a while.
You were in the industry, right? When you were in the hot seat. Well, apparently, the greatest risk is when you look to the side, right? And when you're looking around. I mean, I guess you have to, like you mentioned, a little bit. You got to be aware of your environment, and some of the competitive threats. But you cross that line and look too long, you're straight into a wall.
Yeah.
Right.
Follow your eyes.
Right. So focus is absolutely paramount. I want to just you're doing a lot of things right now, right? You've got this incredible board position at Macy's. You are the executive in residence at America's best, or one of the best art schools in America, SCAD, and you're advising and consulting to retail leaders and organizations. How are tell us about this chapter in your your career. And I'm also kind of just selfishly interested in, like, tell us a little bit more about the consulting work you do in the retail space.
Well, I have to say I'm really loving it. Everybody told me, what it was going to be like to be retired, especially because I've been, I'm a Type A personality. I've been driven for 47 years of my career, and I'm thinking, I'm listening to all these people, I'm thinking I'm getting a little nervous, and I thought, you know what, just accept it, and go with it, and let it lead where it's going to lead, like everything else in my life. There was no game plan in my life. I just went with what was in front of me, and I thought, well, that seems like to be the right decision. Go work for Hermes. They offered you the job. Go work for Hermes. So I've continued with that same feeling, and I'm enjoying it immensely. I still love challenges. The people that I'm working with now, I love listening to their challenges, what they're worried about, using the same principles that I've used for many, many years. We talk about management, we talk about culture, we talk about strategy, we talk about, the uncompromising commitment. Define who you are, and then stay with that, stay focused on that. And I'm a little bit surprised at how people just continue to get unfocused. They start looking over here, and I was like, no, that is not who you are. Stop looking at that. That's not who you are. And I think I've helped some people with that, because it does help them stay very focused. This is what you do best, and stay on this, for a while. Today's world moves so quickly. Everybody just wants to move faster and faster and faster. Slow down. Slow down a little bit. It's gonna help you.
Well, because we have to adapt and evolve and grow and try new things, and that's part of the joy of life. But you do it. You build upon a base that's firm and uncompromising in terms of, like, your core identity and what you stand for. And I think what can happen is that piece also starts to just get put in the washing machine.
Yeah.
So that's really
There's a parallel as well. We're talking about how you understand who you are and stay disciplined around the things that you say no to. And there is an individual version of that we can all play out in our lives. And there is an organizational version of that, which is knowing what your organization is and does and who they serve. And that then allows you a lot more clarity and focus and discipline around ignoring the things that have nothing to do with where you shouldn't be. And so, we individually follow that same pathway, and we have a shining example of how that can happen organizationally through the value of people.
through the value of people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're getting to that point on the podcast where we're doing our leadership lightning round. So just kind of like, let's percolate. There's been I mean, this has been so rich, the amount of insights. Insights, interestingly, you can make the error of thinking that just resides in your head. But many of the things we talked about today went into my heart, and I just I'll be re-listening to this podcast along with our viewers. A parting piece of advice, or something that really resonated from this conversation. I'll kick us off. I just we'll save the best for last. And for me, there's this word uncompromising, which has me really compelled. To me, it is connected to focus, but knowing we have to adapt, and this is the tricky part about leadership and being human, frankly, which is like, we have to know what to change and what not to change. Where do we adapt? Where do we preserve and stay steadfast? But kind of like deciphering what is that thing or a couple of things that we're not going to be like uncompromising on, and then to really bring it to make it happen, which is so inspiring and energizing for me. So that's my parting reflection. Jamie?
I would say, I think we're back to this idea that distraction is out there. And, leadership is about people. So inside our organization, understanding, knowing, respecting, and even loving the people that we work with, it is possible. And actually, it will create beautiful, magical, one of our favorite words, magical, unintended consequences. And so don't be afraid of it as leaders. Lean into it where you can.
I just watched you, Jonathan, when you said that some of the discussion went into your heart today. And when you said that, you smiled. And one thing that I've learned is when I started using the word love in front of the organization, you can see the smiles. People just, when they hear the word, they smile.
Just the
And I
natural
thought
reaction
it's a
to-
powerful word. So my thing is like, I talk about that uncompromising commitment. I think that to have an uncompromising commitment to loving your people is, you said, what's the secret sauce? That's the secret sauce. And most people are afraid to go there. They're afraid to talk about it. And I always tell them, it's not a romantic love. It's caring. It's caring. It's nurturing. It's bringing somebody into your office and saying, you did something really bad, but I love you so much that I don't ever want you to do that again. Don't make that mistake again. And that person, I've seen people just completely turn around thinking like, wow, you cared enough about me to tell me that. And now they're like on a track to, to become an even better executive and a better leader. So
The feedback itself framed in the overarching, I'm giving you this feedback because I
love you,
and
yeah.
because I love you.
exactly.
Wow.
So
Well, I will say, we didn't, thank God we didn't talk about AI because like, it's just like everywhere you go. And it's like, we just have like an hour without talking about AI, but, and so not to spoil that, but to end even on an optimistic note, like that's the one thing, like AI is going to get really, really powerful. It's already extremely powerful.
yes.
And whether you're in the AGI camp or not, or wherever you sit with this, like this thing is growing like a hockey stick, and it's very, very powerful, and it's going to shape the world, retail, leadership. That's the one thing it cannot do, or will ever be able to do. It will not be able to care, and it will not be able to love, and that is the humanity that is our opportunity to seize. And who better to learn from than Bob Chavez? Thank you so much for being here on the show. And Jamie, it's my wingman, my consigliere coach. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Bob.